There's really no proof that the flood of Noah did happen. This is the objection you will often hear skeptics give concerning the Great Flood in Genesis 6:9. Many of them also believe this objection rules biblical claims and Christianity out of the equation. But they actually have a point, because if you cannot really believe the creation story at the beginning of the Bible due to a few misfitting narratives, how then can you believe the rest of it? And since the Bible doesn't categorically provide us all the answers concerning the events in Genesis, it's safe to ask, where did all the water go after the flood? This video promises to provide both biblical and scientific evidence that points to the answers we're looking for concerning the waters of the flood. Before we get started, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a video from us. The story of the Great Flood is one of the most well-known stories in the Bible, found in Genesis chapters 6 to 9. It begins with God observing man's wickedness and deciding to cleanse the earth with a massive flood. God chose Noah, a righteous man, to build an ark to save himself, his family, and pairs of every animal species. This decision to preserve life through Noah signifies both judgment and mercy, which are central to this story. Noah obediently constructs the ark, and when the time comes, he gathers his family and the animals. The deluge begins, lasting 40 days and 40 nights, causing a flood that covers even the highest mountains. The description of the relentless rain and the rising waters paints a picture of an earth submerged in chaos and transformation. The waters prevail on the earth for 150 days, which shows the magnitude of this event. Eventually, God remembers Noah and causes a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters begin to recede. This turning point in the event signifies divine intervention and the restoration of order. After several months, the ark comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah sends out a raven and later a dove to check if the waters have subsided. The dove's return with an olive leaf is a sign that the floodwaters are receding and that life is beginning to flourish once again. Noah, his family, and the animals finally leave the ark, and God makes a covenant with Noah, symbolized by the rainbow. This covenant promises that never again will a flood destroy all life on earth, highlighting the themes of renewal and divine assurance. But do you know one thing? The biblical flood story is not unique to historians. Many ancient cultures have similar flood myths, suggesting a shared experience of catastrophic flooding. For example, the Epic of Gilgamesh, an ancient Mesopotamian text, tells of a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity, with a single man, Utnapishtim, building a boat to save his family and animals. You can't fail to observe how the parallels between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical flood story are striking, from the divine warning to the construction of a vessel and the survival of a select few. Apart from the legend of Gilgamesh, Hindu texts also describe a great flood, with the god Vishnu instructing Manu to build a boat to save himself and the sacred seeds of life. This story, found in the Matsya Purana, emphasizes preservation and renewal, similar to the biblical account. In Greek mythology, the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha involves a flood sent by Zeus to punish humanity, with Deucalion and Pyrrha surviving by building an ark. These similarities suggest that the flood narrative actually did happen and might be based on a common ancient event or a shared experience of catastrophic flooding. But what do geology and hydrology tell us about such an event? Geologists study the Earth's layers to understand its history. Sedimentary layers, for example, can provide evidence of past floods. Some flood geologists argue that the sedimentary rock layers around the world are evidence of a global flood. They point to features like widespread sediment deposits and fossil beds as indicators of a massive, rapid inundation. However, mainstream geology offers different explanations. During the Ice Age, Giant ice sheets covered significant portions of the Earth. As the climate warmed, these ice sheets melted, causing massive floods. The melting of the Laurentide ice sheet, for example, released vast amounts of water into the ocean, raising sea levels and possibly causing regional flooding on a scale that could inspire flood myths. Additionally, regional floods like the one caused by the breaching of glacial Lake Missoula, which sent a torrent of water across the northwestern United States, demonstrate how localized but massive floods could be remembered as global events. The evidence left behind by these floods includes large-scale erosional features, such as the channeled scablands in Washington state. Geological evidence points to significant regional flooding events in the Middle East, where the biblical flood narrative originates. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for example, have a long history of causing devastating floods due to their seasonal flooding patterns and the flat terrain of the surrounding Mesopotamian region. Scientists believe these floods could have been severe enough to inspire the stories passed down through generations. However, to understand where the floodwaters could have gone, we need to look at the hydrological cycle. The water cycle describes the movement of water on, above, and below the surface of the Earth. Water evaporates from the oceans, forms clouds, and falls as precipitation. It then flows through rivers back to the oceans. Through this cycle, water eventually returns to the oceans after a massive flood. Additionally, the Earth's oceans, which cover about 71% of the planet's surface, can absorb large amounts of water. The atmosphere also plays a crucial role. Clouds and weather systems can distribute water across the globe, balancing out the effects of localized flooding. The concept of isostatic rebound also comes into play. When large ice sheets melt, the land that was previously compressed under the weight of the ice begins to rise. This process can create new pathways for water to flow and redistribute itself. For example, the melting of the Laurentide ice sheet not only raised sea levels, but also caused significant changes in the landscape of North America. Modern hydrological models help us understand how water from a massive flood could be redistributed. These models take into account factors like evaporation rates, precipitation patterns, and river flow dynamics. They show that even after a large-scale flooding event, the water would eventually be absorbed into the oceans and atmosphere, returning to a state of equilibrium. To understand how the Earth's shape and features have changed over time, the geography of the Earth during the flood story was quite different from today. Ancient maps and descriptions indicate that regions like Mesopotamia, where the biblical and other flood stories originate, were prone to flooding due to their river systems. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for instance, have a long history of causing devastating floods, as noted earlier. Historical geography also shows that after the last ice age, the melting ice caused significant shifts in sea levels. These changes could have created conditions that ancient people interpreted as a global flood. The idea of shifting land masses is also crucial. Continental drift and tectonic activities have altered the Earth's surface over millions of years, which could explain some of the dramatic changes described in ancient texts. For example, the region now known as the Persian Gulf was once a fertile plain that was gradually inundated by rising sea levels after the last ice age. This transformation would have been dramatic for the people living there, potentially inspiring flood stories that were passed down through generations. Today, modern technology allows us to understand ancient landscapes better. Satellite imagery and geological surveys have revealed ancient floodplains and river systems that could correspond to the flood event. For example, the Black Sea deluge theory suggests that a massive flood around 7,600 years ago could have inspired the flood stories. Rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age might have caused the Mediterranean Sea to breach a natural dam, flooding the Black Sea basin and displacing human populations. However, here's something that still strikes our curiosity. The story of the Great Flood can be interpreted in various ways. Some people view it as a literal historical event, while others see it as a metaphor or allegory. A literal interpretation suggests that the flood covered the entire earth and that the details in Genesis are factual. This view is often held by those who believe in the inerrancy of the Bible. On the other hand, a metaphorical interpretation sees the flood as a symbol of divine judgment and renewal. It could represent the idea of cleansing and starting anew, which is a common theme in many religious and mythological stories. This interpretation allows for another understanding of the story, seeing it as a reflection of human experiences and emotions rather than a historical event. The theological implications of a global versus regional flood are also significant. A global flood suggests a complete reset of creation, emphasizing the totality of divine judgment and the universality of sin. A regional flood, however, could be seen as a more localized act of judgment, still severe but not encompassing the entire planet. This distinction affects how believers understand the nature of God's actions and the scope of the flood's impact. The flood story also raises several philosophical questions. Why would God or any other deity choose to flood the earth? Is it just to punish all of humanity for the sins of some? But the very thought of these questions touches on the nature of divine justice and mercy. The flood can be seen as a form of divine retribution for humanity's wickedness, but also as an act of mercy providing a fresh start for creation. Scholars such as Hugh Ross and John H. Walton have contributed to this discussion by proposing that the flood story in Genesis could reflect a massive regional event rather than a global catastrophe. This perspective aligns with the views of some Christian scientists and theologians who argue that the descriptions in Genesis could be based on significant regional flooding events, such as those in the Mesopotamian basin, which were interpreted as global by the people who experienced them. Others, like Peter Enns and N.T. Wright, believes that the story of the flood is intended to convey theological and moral truths rather than scientific facts. According to these men, the story merely serves to teach lessons about human nature, divine justice, and mercy. The interesting thing is this perspective allows for harmony between science and scripture, suggesting that each addresses different types of questions, empirical versus existential. We know that myths often encode real historical events in symbolic language. Scholars like Claude Levi-Strauss have explained how mythic stories preserve the memory of catastrophic events. The flood account, in particular, can be seen as a myth that integrates the memory of a significant natural disaster into the cultural and religious frameworks of ancient communities. But mythic stories are important because they convey collective memories and values. They help us understand how ancient people perceived their world and coped with its challenges. The work of Walter Burkert emphasizes that myths provide a means to communicate complex ideas and experiences that are both accessible and memorable. By examining these integrated perspectives, we can appreciate the depth and complexity of the flood story and its enduring significance in human culture. The mystery of where the water went after the flood remains quite a catch. Scientific evidence suggests that the water could have returned to the oceans and atmosphere through the natural water cycle. Geographic studies provide insights into ancient flood events that could have inspired the story. In the end, the story of the Great Flood continues to amaze us because it speaks to universal human experiences and concerns. Whether seen as a historical event, a symbolic one, or a blend of both, it remains a subtle and enduring part of our understanding. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.